Can Joe Burrow support 3 different wide receivers that are not going to let us down in fantasy? And can Joe Mixon not let us down for the however many years in a row? We're going to ask those kind of questions to some really smart guys who also happen to be Bengals fans. And this is the DLF team preview series. All that coming up. We lost Andrew. I assume he's going to come back and make his way back on with us. But until he does, I'll go ahead and introduce everyone to who we have here to talk about our Bengals. We're going to talk about the 2021 season in Dynasty, but also Dynasty value. So not just what they're going to do this year, but how much Dynasty value does each one of the fantasy relevant players on the Bengals have. And all of a sudden, the Bengals have a lot. That wasn't always the case. And to help talk about that, on my left is Mr. Scott Connor. You know him from Mannequin Chill. Scott, what are you doing? Like, tell everybody where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Well, you nailed it. Like, you can find us on Mannequin Chill here on DLF. Maybe a weekly show. It's pretty manic, our schedule. But yeah, every once in a while, Shane Manila and I will do a Mannequin Chill. Dynasty and Chill is my podcast for Dynasty, and then Chasing the Helmet is what I do for High Stakes. So you can find me all over. YouTube, podcasting, have a Patreon channel, and then DLF work. So glad to be here. I mean, I was pumped when you said, let's talk about some Bengals, because it seems like many arguments or debates or hopefully agreements between a lot of us we're going to have tonight. I've had to kind of have with non-Bengals fans all offseason.
Very good. That's the kind of stuff that we look for here. This is good because look, nobody listens to our team and watches our team the way we do, right? Like, I'm a Saints fan. I watch the Saints more than I watch anybody else. Like, you try to be unbiased, and I usually find people are worried about bias, but usually people are kind of harder on their own teams, maybe even than other ones. So Taylor, I know we've done this before. Appreciate you coming back on. What are you up to these days, and where can everybody find you?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid to say what I'm up to because I've actually been on an unscheduled but 6-week hiatus where I just haven't really produced anything. But I'm not going to apologize because I've kind of enjoyed the time away. But I'm always out on Twitter @_Taylor Cornell. Got a few different podcasts I do along the way. Some Dynasty. I actually started, to Scott's point, and as you were saying, we know our team's the best, and I felt like in March and April, I was going to battle with so many non-Bengals fans about what the Bengals are doing in the draft. That's what prompted me to start a Bengals podcast. And so I've done 3 episodes there of that. Unfortunately, that's been one of the things that has fallen off the last few weeks, but I'll get back on that this offseason. And I'm really excited to kind of do that, from a non-fantasy perspective, talk through, the X's and O's of the football team that I root for and do some in-season stuff there. So Scott, you're always welcome to come on if you want to, man. Always looking for people to help me talk to people.
Anytime. Let's chop it up whenever.
Sounds good.
Still efforting to get Andrew back in here. And but until he does, Scott, I want to start with, I know where Taylor stands on this. We talked about it actually on the offseason preview about who he would want to draft. How did you feel about the Bengals going ahead and making their first selection, Jamar Chase?
Yeah, I mean, this was the debate for, ever since January or February. And then it started to hit the mainstream. And then it was people that I've never seen have an opinion before come out of the woodwork, experts on what the Bengals should be or what they should be doing. I was Team Chase all the way, just simply because if you understand the draft, and the thing is the Bengals typically are about as vanilla as it comes when it comes to the draft. And so I'm sitting here going, if they're going to sit here and pick where they're selecting, which I expected them to do, any of these ideas of really creative trade backs where they get multiple firsts, that's not going to be the Bengals. So if they're going to sit here and pick the best player on their board, and when you start looking at, we'll get into this from a dynasty perspective too, but when you start getting into a scarcity thing, what was the theme? What did we see a couple months before the draft? We saw wide receivers, basically, they're abundant in the NFL today. And it's the same in Dynasty. If you can get a elite alpha difference-making receiver, it can shape your entire offense. Not that Penei Sewell wasn't worth it, but I was Team Chase, especially this is the offense. People can say, oh, well, Zach Taylor's not any good. This offense isn't going to work. That's the offense they're drafting for. That's the offense they're running. It's 3 wide receivers. And anybody that looked at their depth chart goes, okay, it was Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Auden Tate, and then what? And this is a team that's going to run 3 receivers more than 80% of the time. At least they did last year. Who's the third guy? So, yeah, the offensive line needs work. And I would have liked to see maybe them take some different players later on in the draft. But it was team chase all the way. Get the elite player, lock it in. Don't worry about, they could have taken another receiver in the 2nd or 3rd or 4th. It's not the same thing. So I was team chase all the way.
But Taylor, I saw a meme going around the internet that convinced me that they aren't going to be able to complete passes to Jamar Chase if they don't have Penny Sewell. I know where you stand on this, but what do you say to somebody who says they needed an offensive lineman there more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Scott on this too, and I talked about it probably an annoying amount on my timeline in April leading up to the draft. But so many people were counting on Higgins and Boyd and saying, "Look, you've got 2 really good receivers. Do you really need a receiver? No. Joe Burrow has a shredded knee. You need an offensive lineman type of thing." And I didn't really look at the Jamar Chase pick as a luxury pick because we weren't taking a receiver that we hope will be. I mean, I guess in a way we always hope they're good, but this is as bulletproof of a prospect as we've seen at wide receiver in a while. There is nobody that's talking about Jamar Chase that doesn't think he's going to be an elite player. And so not that Penny Sewell will not be really, really good. Maybe he will be, but to suggest that you take Sewell and just get some other receiver later in the draft, it's like, well, yeah, the talent drop off to Diami Brown in round 2 or 3 or wherever you would have got him, or Terrace Marshall, I much rather would have Chase over those guys. And Scott mentioned, I maybe kind of wish they would have taken Tevin Jenkins as he was falling in the 2nd round, and they ended up getting their guy, Jackson Carman, instead. But we still got a good lineman in round 2, and we'll see how it plays out. But I was all over Team Chase, and we made other improvements along the line, hopefully enough to keep Joe Burrow upright. And Burrow's that, you're an LSU fan, so you've watched him. Burrow is that special type of talent that doesn't need an elite offensive line to produce. He needs an average offensive line, and he's going to make everyone else around him that much better. And I think we did enough this offseason to raise that line to a standard that is going to allow Burrow to stay on his feet. And I'm really curious to see how Burrow and Chase pick up where they left off in LSU.
Andrew, welcome back. Glad to have you back here with us. And go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you, what you've been working on. Just introduce yourselves to the people.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that. I don't know. Computer issues, Taylor. Apparently, you just infected me with something. That was terrific. But no, I apologize for the delay there. But so my name's Andrew Hall. I write at Pro Football Network. I'll be probably coming back there this fall, and then also I write for Fantasy Pros. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Hall FF. That's where a lot of my stuff goes, and where I like to have the most conversations. So that's always what I like to pimp the most. Let's put it. It's just
there you go. There you go. So Jamar Chase to the Bengals, that was probably the most hotly debated, controversial Cincinnati Bengals talk, I think, over the offseason, maybe in the whole NFL. What was your take on them taking Chase?
So I was Team Sewell until about a week or 2 before the draft, and Taylor hit the nail on the head. It was like, the drop off from Sewell to the other linemen, the difference there is small. The difference from Chase to everyone else is insane. We all knew we were losing AJ Green, and I was like, I don't think Higgins is the Green replacement. I was like, I think Higgins would be a terrific secondary guy, and if we get Chase, that offense just goes to the moon. So yeah, I kind of came around. I listened to smart people and kind of thinking, you know what, that's not a bad idea. They made some free agency moves. So yeah, I was Team Sewell for a while, and then eventually looked at the logic and wiped the cobwebs away, and was like, oh yeah, Team Chase, that makes sense. Let's go get it. So I was real happy with it.
Yeah. So in retrospect, everybody is like Team Chase, and it makes sense, right? Duh, he's an awesome prospect.
Have you seen him? Yeah.
Come on. Exactly. So yeah, of course. Scott, let's talk about the implications of what that means for their fantasy team in 2021 and beyond, because it does have some implications to the passing offense. You have 2 weapons there that we felt really confident that we're going to get a lot of volume. Can they support 3 wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it happen before. There's been multiple teams over the last decade that have supported 3 receivers inside the top 36. I mean, top 24, that's tough. That's pushing it. You're going to need extreme volume. Now, I see people flash up the pace stats from last year. Through 10 games, this is what Burrow was on pace to throw for. Same thing with Dallas with Dak through 5 games. And it's like, you're probably not going to get 40 plus pass attempts a game. I mean, that's not how the offense wants to play, but they do want to play as fast as they've played. They probably want to throw it 37, 38 times, which over the course of a season is going to be 30, 40 pass attempts less than your projections. Still going to be top 10, top 8 in the league. So I think the initial analysis from what I've seen on a lot of projections is it pretty much nobody is really convicted on where the targets are going to go. They're all going to be right around the same, anywhere from 115 to 130 for all 3 guys. And I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if one guy's going to emerge and get more. I think it's going to be very game plan specific. The one thing I do want to crush, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but I actually think Tyler Boyd is as locked in as he's been. I mean, he is what he is. If you think of what Golden Tate used to be for Detroit, it's very similar. Like, he's never going to be a guy that probably has a top 20 ceiling. But I see people saying, oh, he's going to lose out. They're immediately going to drop his targets down. He's only going to get 100 targets. And the best narrative is, well, they can get out of his contract really soon. After next year, they can get out of his contract. And it's like, dude, these people are they not plugged in with the Bengals at all? Tyler Boyd's like the team captain. Unless he gets hurt, he's going to be on this team into his 30s. Like that, I would bet he plays 5 more years before he gets cut because he makes too much money. And that's just not how the Bengals operate. So I think it's pretty safe for the next 2 or 3 years that you have 3 guys that could finish inside the top 30.
And this is exactly why we do these kind of things, because of those little anecdotes, right? Like, I think not being in Cincinnati, I don't realize, that, like you said, he's a team captain and an important part of the team in that way. I saw that with Mark Ingram here in New Orleans. So I knew wherever he went, he was going to see the field because he was a locker room presence that everybody loved. Taylor, what's your breakdown on the 3 wide receivers there, and how are those targets going to be distributed and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the fun part of fantasy is you have to kind of plant your flag somewhere because it's not fun to be wishy-washy. But in all reality, nobody knows. Like, nobody really knows. The argument for Boyd, the people that want to say Boyd is going to be just taking off is, well, now you've got Jamar and you've got T. Higgins to draw coverage away. He's going to eat across the middle. The people that love T. Higgins will say Jamar Chase takes away coverage and Boyd will be taking the underneath, and that leaves Higgins one-on-one. It's like you could make an argument for any of them. I personally believe Boyd will be very consistent, kind of what Scott was saying. He is what it is. I think he lacks like an upside in your fantasy roster. If, he's your wide receiver 1, I would hope you've got like some stud running backs because he's not going to really elevate your team. But for PPR, he's going to be extremely consistent. I see a lot of 6 for 60 days in his season. So there's 12 PPR points. You can almost bank on it. I think Higgins and Chase have the upside that he does not. He's not going to see the volume that he would need to be able to be any type of wide receiver 1 for fantasy. But I think all 3 of them will be very fantasy relevant from the get-go.
Andrew, you agree?
Totally agree. Yeah, you know who Boyd starts to remind me of. The more I watch him, the more I pay attention to the team is Hushmanzada. Like, one of those guys that you're just like, he's not flashy, but he gets the job done, right? There's all this pomp and circumstance going over there, and he just does it. He just gets it done, and he doesn't complain about it. He doesn't have he's got a huge heart, but he doesn't have a big ego to go with it. So yeah, I think Boyd's gonna I think Scott hit the nail on the head. I think Boyd's gonna be on the team for a while. This team doesn't necessarily like to do a lot of churn and burn when they find a good guy. I mean, AJ Green was on the team for how long, right? I mean, we tend to take a guy and kind of run him into the ground. That's how
Marvin
the Mike Brown
Lewis.
family. Oh yeah, that's how the Mike Brown family likes to do stuff, right? Zach Taylor could die on this team, right? We might not like that, but it could be a 30-year run with Zach Taylor coming up. But I think all of that just points to Boyd being a terrific value in fantasy because, yeah, he's not flashy. He doesn't have that upside, but he's the perfect wide receiver 3 flex guy. He's the guy you want consistently putting up points. If your team is built around risk, Boyd is a terrific addition. If your team is boring, do not take Boyd. I talk about this all the time in conversations on Twitter, and I'm actually going to be writing an article about it next month for Fantasy Pros, but drafting for balance, right? You have to have a little bit of everything to win the whole thing. You can't just take upside guys and expect to win a title. You need these underground performers that are building your floor because that's how you get through those bad weeks. when, AJ Brown's on a bye and you just need to squeak through, that's when Tyler Boyd can come and help you out. So I love Tyler Boyd as in that, for your bench or wide receiver 3 option. I think it's a terrific pick. And I also think you're exactly right. Higgins and Chase are going to be blowing it up, blowing the top off the defenses. You got Mixon coming out of the backfield. I mean, everybody's going to eat on this offense. So I'm not afraid of any of them at this point.
Just real quick, see some questions coming in. We're going to definitely get to all of those, like as we get to the end of the show. Normally, like on my Ask DLF show on Tuesday nights, we pull those right up. We're not going to do that tonight. We're going to talk through a couple things, and I'm going to get to all those. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and leave them there, and we will make sure that we get to those. An interesting stat that kind of caught my eye on the Bengals actually last year is how many times they get first downs. They actually run a lot of plays and get a lot of first downs, but they've been very inconsistent in the red zone. And I kind of wonder if the drafting of Chase was more about a red zone weapon, somebody that can get the ball into the end zone. And if Burrows had something in his game that wasn't great last year, it was he didn't have a lot of touchdowns. So from a fantasy perspective, adding Chase, assuming health and all of that, which I think all the reports are that he will be. I mean, Scott, what's Joe Burrow's ceiling with this group of weapons that he's got around him right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Burrow right now, he has a lot of flaws. I mean, people talk about how good he was last year. Extremely inefficient as a passer. If you look at points created for his receivers, it was extremely poor. I mean, outside of the top 25 in the league. Actually pretty comparable to Tua, and people kind of crap on Tua and say he didn't have a great rookie year. But Burrow really wasn't much better in terms of the expected points for his receivers and what they actually produced. He won on volume, very similar to an early Jared Goff the last couple of years. Terrible, but they just passed a lot, so we won. I think the other thing with Burrow is historically rookie quarterbacks, they do struggle getting it into the end zone. They do struggle with touchdowns. So that's something. I don't think Burrow necessarily has a top 5 ceiling in Dynasty. I think he could have some top 5 seasons, but he doesn't run enough to probably be counted on as, hey, this is a guy that I can count on year to year to maybe be in the top 5. But, I see maybe a Tom Brady, Drew Brees type career where he's going to get there because he just has really super efficient seasons, maybe adds a little bit more rushing than those guys. But I think he's priced pretty fairly. I mean, I think he has a ceiling where it's top 6, top 8 in given seasons, but I think you're buying him at his price right now because of his longevity. I mean, 15+ year career.
Yeah, and Andrew, Taylor, feel free to jump in here. Taylor, I'll direct the question at you though. Based on what he's saying there with Joe Burrow's inefficiency, are you seeing the same thing when you? I know you're a numbers guy. You look at underneath the hood a lot. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people harped on Joe Burrow's inaccuracy deep, and that was kind of what stood out his rookie season when you were watching the games is, missing T. Higgins. And there was a number of times where Higgins beat his guy. I tend to throw out any target directed toward AJ Green as don't even consider it because I don't know who that receiver was that was on the field wearing number 18 last year. Wasn't the same guy that would go up and get a ball. But definitely we saw some outages there from Burrow. He struggled, and it was really odd because when you looked at his college tape, that was a real strength of his. And of course, I don't have the stat up in front of me now, but it was something like when targeting Jamar Chase in 2019, he had 12 touchdowns or 15 touchdowns that were over 20-yard variety. So he really used Chase as that deep threat. And we also know Chase has the yak ability, which helps turn kind of safer passes into bigger plays. And I think we'll see that Burrow benefit from that this year. It felt like there was, at least at the first half of Burrow's season, a lot of forcing the ball to AJ Green for one reason or another, whether he felt like he needed to or something. And I think this year we're going to see a more comfortable Burrow back there, even though he's coming back from a major injury. I think he's going to be more comfortable with the offense as a whole. I mean, we tend to forget it was kind of a shortened offseason, a weird COVID offseason. And the offensive line was, we're hoping much worse last year than it will be this year. So I think there was a lot of things also working against Burrow that hopefully as we see some improvements in those areas, we'll see Burrow's deep ball improve a little bit as well. And Jamar Chase will help with that.
Well, that's actually where I wanted to jump in was Burrow came in number 1 pick starting week 1 without Andy Dalton, right? I really wish they would have kept Dalton and let him, I don't know, guide Burrow, kind of like Fitzpatrick was able to do with Tua. Not on the field. I'm saying let Burrow start, but have Dalton in the background and like in the room, helping him out. I'm not a huge Dalton lover. I just think that he was a pretty good quarterback. And I think if you add that base to what Burrow knew and you don't have Dalton start or anything like that, but you just have him in the room as a backup, I think that would have helped. I don't think you have to have him play like Fitz played over Tua, but I think your comparison there is right on. And I think too, he played 10 games, right? Burrow did. And I think there was some rust he had to knock off in that shortened season, and all of the pressure was on his back. That's why he was forcing it to Green. He's like, Green's our number one guy. We're going to get it to Green and we're going to succeed. And they didn't succeed, and Green didn't succeed. And I think there was a whole bunch of, I don't want to say pressure, it isn't the right word, but there was a whole bunch of focus on that. And I think now that that's gone, yes, he had an injury and he's coming back from that, but with that weight off of his shoulders and him able to take the team and do what he wants with it, I think you're going to see an opened up Burrow, and he's not going to be afraid to throw downfield. And he's got his guy running down the routes that he's familiar with, right? And kind of able to get the spacing right and kind of just launch it up and let his guy go. And you're right, exactly. AJ Green didn't go get it. He just wasn't. He was a shell of his former self, in my opinion. He just wasn't that alpha guy that he's been. So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that changes, even though the offense is the same and the team is the same and the coach is the same. There's a whole bunch of new world for Burrow to dive into this year, and I'm really looking forward to it. And just to kind of go back on what Scott was saying, I agree that he's probably not a top 5 dynasty quarterback. I just don't think he's got that Konami code. But I mean, QB8, that's not bad. I'll take that. That's a solid long-term quarterback for 15 years. If he's a Drew Brees career, hell, that's a steal. I would love that kind of career for anybody, both Bengals and in fantasy. So I don't think any of that's a negative, and I don't think capping his ceiling at 8 is doing him any sort of disservice or being rude. I think that's actually a good ceiling for him. There's 32 starting quarterbacks. If he's a top 8 quarterback, top quarter of the league, any Bengals fan would be happy with that, given what we've had.
There was a really interesting. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'll add that, the Bengals got to figure it out, but we'll get into the new offensive line coach and that kind of stuff. But, he had 4 brutal road games last year. You're talking about pass rushes, Philly, Washington, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. He faced all of those on the road in the 10 games that he played. And so, for a rookie that's thrown right in there day one, and we've heard, I'm sure Taylor and Andrew can back this up. The reports were literally like day one, Burrow's, calling audibles in the huddle. Like he's a 10-year vet in the huddle day one. You don't see that, and you don't see the appreciation for that around the league. So the fact that he was already there and we didn't even have to get through like really any growing pains. Like it felt like by like week 2 or week 3, we just had a veteran out there that we've been running with for 5 years. And then it abruptly came to a halt. I think that's what hurt so much. But you look back last year at some of the teams that couldn't get a pass rush, like the Tennessee game, they didn't get one hit on Burrow. He diced them up. That's the kind of thing where he has those ceiling games in him, plus 50 attempts in a given game if they have a bad defense. So just wanted to add that. He kind of got dealt a rough hand, like Calvin said.
So I heard this somewhere. It might have been from Taylor. I don't remember, but somebody had a theory that basically that this was going to be the last year for Zach Taylor. Was it you, Taylor? And that Joe Brady was going to come over and be the head coach in Cincinnati.
I have seen it and I have supported it. I have not floated that theory out. I don't want to get too optimistic. So
I can't remember who said that. That of all the things that would be amazing to have happen,
yes,
like that's number one. Like the whole NFL, like him coming back in there with Chase and with But sticking back to Zach Taylor, the one thing is, yes, he's not this Konami code that's going to have like a bunch of rushing statistics. Joe Burrow is not incapable of running, but he's, not going to have a ton. But if you're going to have that, one way to break through would certainly be to have an opportunity or have a chance to lead the league in passing attempts. I think Zach Taylor wants to run more plays than anybody else. Like when he had Andy Dalton, and when he had Joe Burrow last year, it was very up-tempo. Now, when he had the backups, like it wasn't the same exact pace, but he wants to run a lot of plays. And I think that's an underrated part of this offense. Switching gears to the running back side, does that ultimately, if we can get a healthy Joe Mixon, I know we got a lot of ifs there, but I see your face, Andrew. Like, what are we thinking Joe Mixon this year? If we're running that many plays and the offense is doing well in the passing game, does that open things up for him?
For sure. Yeah. And I think adding Chase to the outside makes defenses have to worry more about that than they did with AJ Green. I think even if Mixon isn't 100% healthy, and it's hard to really project any running back to make it all 17 games we're asking them to play now. I'm not going to be shocked if he misses a couple. I think most running backs would. But just barring any massive injury or weird thing like last year where the foot injury kept him out and then he went on IR, barring anything like that, I do think Mixon has a top 10 running back performance in him. Does that make him a top 10 running back in fantasy? I don't know. I think his risk is a little high, but I do think his reward is high too. The way this offense is going to go, if we're throwing 40 times and running 25, how the hell are you not going to be a top 10 running back in that kind of offense? Yes, the offensive line got help, but it maybe isn't perfect. But what line is, right? It's a slow rebuild. I think that the kind of players the Bengals are getting definitely helps Mixon out more than it looks like on paper. So yeah, I definitely think Mixon's going to be the guy. And with getting rid of Bernard, I think that signifies a lot to me too. I've actually got an article I'm writing for Fantasy Pros that should come out soon, talking about positive target regression candidates, and Mixon's on that list. He does well with the passing game if they give him the opportunity, and getting rid of Bernard is pretty much them saying, it's yours. So, again, we got to see what it does. We got to see it in reality. We're speculating a lot here in end of June, right? It's the off season. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think Mixon's got a lot of potential, both in terms of real and fantasy football. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I'll say I don't disagree with anything there. And I will 100% be transparent in my thinking that I've been burned by Mixon a number of times before. When Mixon came into the league, I was so bullish on him being a top 5 talent at the position. I'm like, this guy can do it all. And, we had Geos taking all the passing work, and we're like, why can't he get more work? And I'll never forget, I went to a preseason game. I was sitting way up high, not even good seats. But I went to a preseason game, and they split Mixon out wide in the red zone. They're at about the 10-yard line, out at wide receiver. They throw him a wide receiver screen. He makes the DB miss in the open field, walks into the end zone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to use Mixon in the passing game this year. And nothing changed once the season rolled around. So I've been burned so many times that, what Andrew's saying, I completely agree with. There's so much opportunity in that offense. And it looks like he's going to be one of the few workhorses by opportunity. There's so many timeshares and committees in the NFL, and he literally might be the guy that's getting 80% of the running back touches for this offense. And you'd want a piece of that, but there is risk. I'm a little worried about whether he'll hold up and how much work he'll actually get in the offense. So we'll see.
Scott, the 24-year-old is going off as the RB15 according to Dynasty League Football ADP. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, we could probably get into a whole debate on running back values in Dynasty, but just a couple of things I wanted to add on Mixon. People call him injury prone. He's missed 4 games in 3 years before last year. And who really knows what that foot injury was? Was it really a 10-game injury, or was it 5 games and then they just decided to shut him down? And they have no reason to report that it's not. So he literally missed 4 games in 3 years. 2 of them was when he had that knee scope, missed another game with a concussion and another game with an ankle sprain. So we're not talking about a guy that perpetually has 2 to 4 to 5 week injuries at a time. The other thing, there's only 5 guys in the last 4 years that have averaged more than 19 touches a game. Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, and Joe Mixon. So if you want volume, if you just take those 2 things, forget about Bernard, forget about the plays. If you just take those 2 things, he's in a position, even if he only gets 60 to 70% of the snaps where he's been at the last couple of years, you don't need 90% of the snaps to get a lot of touches. He gets the majority of the touches regardless of his snap share. So everything sets up for him. Now it's just a matter of, like Taylor said, can he get to – I see a lot of projections that have him 55 to 60 catches. If he does that and he amasses that volume, then he's probably way underpriced. But
I think it also comes down to expectations, like you're saying. It's like I completely fine if Mixon is my RB2, and I'm counting on him to be hopefully a low-end RB1 for fantasy this year, with upside to be higher if everything clicks. I'm fine with that. But if you're saying, I'm confident Mixon's going to be locked and loaded top half RB1, that's where I'm like, I just can't get on board with that. So I wonder for I know this is DLF and I don't really do any redraft, but I wonder when it comes redraft time, whether all this buzz in the offseason, Mixon's going to be pushing up a little bit higher and people's expectations, whether for redraft or just for their dynasty teams for 2021, are going to get a little out of hand for Mixon, because that's where I get a little uncomfortable. I'm more comfortable in the low end RB1, high end RB2 type of thing.
Well, I'll jump in there. I think Mixon's burned a lot of people more in redraft than dynasty, because in redraft you get him, he sucks, and you don't ever have to live with him again, and you don't ever have to draft him again. You can just move on. I think he's burned more people in redraft than dynasty, to be honest, because in dynasty you play the long game, and so a lot of players are like, I'll ride this out. Like, it's not, I'm looking at the long term here. He's got a good opportunity. So I do think in redraft, I think he's going to still stay in that third, fourth round range, which is making a great RB2 value. To kind of go back on something else, though, with this offense increasing, his touchdown chances should increase too, right? The offense is going to be clicking a little bit better. They're not going to be playing from behind so much. They're going to be able to run the clock out. There's all these other narratives that come into play. If things go well, running backs do well. So let's see that happen. Right. I think
Andrew, don't forget we lost Alex Erickson. So there's a few end arounds each game that we don't have to worry about mixing losing this.
Perfect. You're right. I did forget. Thank you for reminding me on that important detail.
Very well.
No. Erickson was one of those guys that I remember. Look, who is it? Oh, it's Erickson. No, but I think that if Mixon stays healthy, like we keep saying, he's not injury prone. He's got the opportunity. The team's got the talent. I mean, all signs point to yes here. But he's burned so many fantasy owners. It is going to be tricky to kind of see what happens as we roll into draft season. And then again, when we see week 1, week 2, week 3, like how does the team really utilize him? Are they able to give him, 20 touches out of the backfield and 7 to 8 targets a game? Are we going to see that? Or is it going to be a slow process as the team kind of gets into their rhythm? So I think he could be one of those guys we see sort of stumble out of the gate and become a terrific trade value in week 3, 4, 5 too. So I'm telling everybody I can, just keep your eye on Mixon. If you don't get him in a draft, don't reach for him. Right. None of us are saying take him in the first round or anything like that. I don't think we're claiming that. But if he falls to you in the third or fourth, feel confident as your RB2, and then keep an eye if you miss him, because I still think there is a chance that somebody will want to get off that train if he's not hitting early. Because, redraft especially, there's a lot of people I play redraft with that are real quick to go on someone and say, nope, I'm out, I'm moving on. We got James Robinson, I'm dropping Mixon for Robinson. It's like, what, are you crazy? But at the same time, it happens every year. So I think Mixon's someone I'm looking for all year. For sure.
It's a good point. It was mentioned a couple times.
Okay, go ahead. I was going to say, I think the move in Dynasty is we have, another guy that kind of fits this same mold is Josh Jacobs. And he's got over 20 touches a game for 2 years. And people have just crapped on him. Like, he's not going to be great, so they've just knocked him way down. I think the move is to pivot off of one of these guys that's valued higher. Can you pivot off of Cam Akers for Mixon and 2 firsts, or a deal like a home run deal like that? And you're just kind of betting for a 1 to 2 year window that Mixon can match one of those guys, and you may win the trade on the back end. But I think that's a theme with guys like Mixon, Aaron Jones, Zeke. These guys are now available in dynasty leagues because the team that has them at any point can say, hey, I'm not a contender, but I have Mixon. I want out. You know what I mean? He's looking good. I want out. So they're more available than they were in past years because they're hanging on, longer than people have expected.
Yeah, at this point with a lot of those guys, I think, if you do buy them, you have to buy them for the remainder of their careers. Like, you probably aren't getting, the value that you're placing on them now. But you're right, it is a lower value at this point. And gosh, Josh Jacobs, I just look, he's RB 21 right now, and he's a year younger than Joe Mixon, which is pretty crazy. It was mentioned a couple times here, the health of Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard being gone. And even I noticed a comment here that had talked about Captain America being in the backfield. Chris Evans. Taylor, let me ask you, what do you think about Chris Evans? Is he going to be the backup, or is it more Samaje Perine or some of the other guys that have been kicking around for a while?
Yeah, I felt like they weirdly liked Samaje Perine more than I thought they would last year. Granted, when Mixon was out, they were running with Gio and Perine became the backup, but I was actually surprised he got as much run as he did. Travion Williams, who we got at Texas A&M a few years ago, must just be really bad because he has really struggled to see the field. And I thought last year was a prime opportunity to get him some more looks. So I don't know. I kind of feel like Perine's going to be the immediate backup. The issue is if they're planning on taking, we think of Gio as the backup that took a lot of the pass catching. I don't think Perine's that guy that's going to come in just for pass catching down. So he might be the series or two, give Mixon a breather type of thing. The makeup, I think, of this running back room makes it ideal for Mixon to be kind of the 3 down back, because Chris Evans is unproven. Puka Williams or whoever it was that they signed as an undrafted free agent. Neither one of those guys, I think, profile as I mean, let's give Gio like some benefit. He was like a really good pass blocker and had really good hands. And I don't think either of those guys profile into a real neat, clean, complete fill in for Gio's role. So I guess P. Ryan's going to be the guy that gives Mixon a blow, but I'm not really super interested in Evans for Dynasty even. I mean, sure, I'll take a flyer on him, but I don't see the Gio upside with him.
Andrew, I don't know how you feel about, handcuffing in fantasy football, but if there is one in this backfield, is it P. Ryan? Is it Evans? Is it Travion? Is it Jacques Patrick, who apparently is also on the depth chart?
No. I mean, I don't really worry about handcuffing too much. I mean, with a guy like Mixon or someone risky, sure, I might, if the price is right, I'll always take a look, right? But there's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of value in having P. Ryan, even if Mixon goes down. I mean, do you really feel confident starting Samaje P. Ryan in place of Mixon? No. Maybe, but I kind of doubt it. Like, even best case scenario, even if they give P. Ryan the ball, he's just not that guy. He doesn't get catches a lot out of the backfield. He's more of your no-name bruiser, as I call it, like one of those guys that you see the stat line, you go, who the hell is that guy that's got 9 carries for 18 yards and a touchdown? Who is this guy? That's what P. Ryan is to me. I mean, that's obviously made up, but that's what he reminds me of. Someone that you're just like, huh? I don't hate Chris Evans. I think he's a terrific actor. I didn't know why he went into football, but I guess if he's in football now, he's got to be in shape. So I'm all for Captain America. But no, I mean, a 6th round running back, I mean, that was a depth pick. And I think what Taylor said was perfect. I mean, Travion Williams must be terrible if they're drafting another running back, the next year, after getting rid of Gio. It's like, okay, well, maybe now Travion's still there. And then they got Puka Williams undrafted, which I thought Puka should have been drafted. So I was like, well, okay, so this team is just stacking running back on running back, and none of them are really stellar, which doesn't bode well for any of them. So yeah, I mean, I'll take a 4th round rookie pick flyer on Chris Evans. Puka's on the waivers, and he'll stay there until he moves some, in the real world. But yeah, P. Ryan's one of those guys I'm not trying to acquire, and I'm probably not selling if I have him on my bench either, just because it's like, what am I going to get for him? No one's paying. He's got to show me something on the field. So yeah, he's an odd hold for me, but definitely not somebody I'm looking to buy.
I'm not, I guess if you took off Joe Mixon, I'm not sure which would be the worst room, the running back room or the tight end room. But at some point, somebody's going to talk themselves into Drew Sample this offseason, right? Taylor, you're going to push back on the Drew Sample love?
Yes. I'm fully out on I really like CJ Uzomah coming back from a tough injury, though is going to sap him a little bit, but even when he was healthy, he wasn't a real fantasy asset, and I just don't think the tight end position is going to be one that this offense is designed to really support a fantasy relevant tight end. And then you look at their other weapons and it's like, well, I really hope Drew Sample isn't seeing more than 3 targets a game. When you've got these other playmakers out there. So it was funny last year. I can't remember what week it was, early-ish in the season, where Drew Sample had a game. I feel like it was the Cleveland game in primetime where he randomly had 11 catches or something. Like, he was getting every check down from Burrow. That was also the game Burrow, I think, threw 60 times. But it was funny after that game where all of a sudden Drew Sample became, the flavor of the week of, how much do you spend on him for fab? Do you trade for him? What's he going to be? And I'm just like, I don't think you want any piece of these tight ends. Thad Moss, though, look out. Reuniting that LSU crew.
That's right. Joe Brady is going to be reunited with Thad Moss too, right? So
look out.
Scott, any hope for any of these tight ends on the roster as a late round guy you take a chance on?
Yeah, if it's one of the two, it's definitely Uzomah. He's the one that's going to be probably, depends on how he comes back from his Achilles injury. Every report is that his rehab's on schedule to play, but coming back from an Achilles is always risky. But the best part about the Bengals tight ends is basically they stay out of the way of everybody else. And that's the most beautiful part about the offense is we don't have 3, 4, 5 tight ends that are leeching 20 targets here, 30 targets here, 50 targets here. I mean, there's other teams. That's one of the things about Dallas is we talk about Dallas, but Dallas has 2 tight ends that could steal 120 targets. And you're going, well, I wish those went to Michael Gallup or more to Amari Cooper, but Bengals don't have to worry about that. So I think that's the best part about
that's a really good point. That's a really good point when you think about how this Bengals offense, and people love, and I absolutely hate this because I don't believe in it, but when people say too many mouths to feed, and I think in a way that could be true if it's legit, but a lot of times it's just used as a lazy argument. But when you think about the Bengals offense, it's going to be so concentrated on the playmakers, the 3 wide receivers, and Mixon. We've talked about how he's going to be probably taking the majority of the running back opportunities. It's so concentrated on those 4 guys, and then Burrow. You would think that this offense could support fantasy relevant stars at those positions. And when you mentioned Dallas, that's one why Michael Gallup has a great season, and then the next year we're kind of because there wasn't enough, even though they're throwing the ball a ton, Jarwin's getting hits, and Dalton Schultz and even Tony Pollard takes some work away from Zeke at times. And you kind of have to worry about what those guys are going to do. And this is a very concentrated offense that I think is going to be pretty potent.
Well, and to kind of piggyback on that for just a second, I do think that there is a lot of what Scott said is true, is that there's not having to take away. But what does that mean? He's not going out to run routes. What does that mean he's doing? He's blocking. The tight ends that stay in there, we need help on the line, right? What do? You keep the tight end close. You watching for those runners. You watch for those stunts and things like this. Like it doesn't. There's nothing but benefit because none of the guys that we have. No offense to CJ Uzomah, I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't think he's a stud tight end in any regard. Thad Moss has some of that potential. Maybe if he can catch the right, coaching tree and kind of figure that out if Joe Brady were to come back, maybe. But I think all these guys, even Sample, are terrific blocking tight ends in their own right. I mean, they're not top 5 blocking tight ends of all time, but they do a fine job, and it adds another player. It makes it an off-season, like a mismatch, right? The offensive line now has 6 guys instead of 5. So I think that, again, it lines up perfect. It funnels everything through the skill position players, which is exactly what you want. You don't want no-name scrubs taking targets away from Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Give the guys that can do it the ball. That's what I want to see, right? And again, it makes too much sense. Again, narrative-wise, opportunity-wise, all of that. I like the way the team is set up with not having a tight end. Fine with me.
I think all those are excellent points. I want to jump over to the other side of the ball. I'm going to use Jake's comment here as a jumping off point. Do you think the addition of, I don't know how you say his name, and Mike Hilton are enough to boost the secondary to a level where we don't have to win games purely based on Bureau throwing the lights out? I'd also add Trey Hendrickson in there as another just like amazing addition who had 13.5 sacks last year. But talk about the defense. Like, is the improvements on the defense, is that enough to take the lid off of what could be a lead the league in passing attempts type offense?
I'll start. I'll just jump in with this and say I'm not a defense-focused person, but I was excited when we signed Hilton. I thought that was a good addition to the team. He may not be a long-term player for us, but I love that addition. I think that just makes us more respectable in the backfield. And I mean, again, Hendrickson, I think, was a great fill-in for drawing a blank, the guy the team that we lost. Somebody help me out on this one.
To New York.
Yeah. Carl Lawson, there you go. Like, he was a perfect Lawson replacement. I was just drawing a blank there. Too many names. But he was a perfect Lawson replacement where it's almost like we don't miss out on much at all. He's going to still have tons of talent, and I think it makes our defense better that we made these moves. And our offense is going to be able to put up points. And I don't know if our defense needs to shut teams down, but I definitely think they've got the talent to do it now. So we'll see what happens. But, yeah, I like it.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to add that, I mean, I've read some stuff about how William Jackson and Lou Anarumo didn't see eye to eye. So everyone talked about, oh, that's such a big loss. And it's like I don't think they ever planned on paying William Jackson what he was going to make. And basically they got Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie for the same amount of money.
There we go.
They also missed Trey Waynes all season last year. Trey Waynes is pretty good against the run. Von Bell basically acts as another linebacker. I mean, the Bengals don't play a lot of 3 linebacker sets, and that's the new NFL. You don't play 3 linebackers, so you need 5, 6, 7 secondary guys out there in some packages. And last year, some of the guys they were rolling out there, I mean, they weren't competitive, but they weren't definitely stopping guys. So I think the secondary is actually going to be one of the biggest wild cards. I think they're going to have off games, but they're also going to have games where they make plays. I mean, it's going to be, I think, a boom or bust secondary, but I'm excited for Mike Hilton. I'm excited for Trey Waynes. I think those 2 guys are going to help in spots where can help them get off the field. And I do think their defensive line, if everybody is healthy, has a really good mix and blend of guys that can get to the passer, but also a nice mix of veterans and also really, really solid guys across all the defensive line. So I'm excited for the defensive line, especially like Joseph Asai that they brought in. I think between him and Hendrickson, I think they'll be fine replacing Carl Lawson. So I'm excited. I think the defense is going to be more fun to watch this year. But yeah, it's going to be It's going to be frustrating at times. They're going to give up points, but definitely I think it's going to be better for sure.
Yeah, and I think we missed DJ Reader all last year too, who was going to help a little bit in the run game. So getting some of those key guys back, and you can argue about which area of the defense is most important. I tend to think your defensive line, if it can generate pressure, take some of that pressure off of your secondary. And last year, this defensive line just had no pressure if it wasn't Carl Lawson. So hopefully this year, if you have Sam Hubbard and Hendrickson together, and then Reader in the middle there, I think that'll hopefully help take some of the pressure off of that back end. And it's kind of nice that, it is a wild card. I would agree the secondary is, but it's kind of nice that you've got the key cog there in Jesse Bates, who is finally starting to get some recognition, nationally as one of the best defensive players, 25 and under. I think PFF had their list. And he can kind of anchor in the back end. Honestly, my main concern with that defense is the linebackers. When you look at the linebacking core, you just don't see any playmakers that are I don't see players that get me excited that they're going to be able to make plays beyond what's right in front of them. So hopefully your defensive line makes up for that. Your secondary is good enough. You don't have to worry about the linebackers too much, but I agree the defense is still going to give up points this year.
Well, the linebackers are definitely the worst group, I guess, if I had to put that title to it. And I think going into the draft, if I recall, I think we were even on another podcast, Taylor, where we said linebacker was kind of like a prime draft need, and they didn't draft a single linebacker. So maybe they disagreed, right? Maybe the team is like, well, no, we're fine with what we got, or maybe the value just wasn't there. I mean, getting Osai, I think, was a great pick. I think there's a couple other, what was that? Shelvin, was that the other guy we got in the fourth with that traded pick? I think there's some value in those guys that could really shore up that interior and even edge rushers like Osai and things like that. So I do think there is a lot of benefit in not having a strong linebacking core. I think it makes us a little bit weak all around, which is kind of frustrating because linebackers, I think, where you can kind of fill in gaps either way, whether running or passing. And so not having a good linebacking core means we're going to have to rely on the other two ends, right? The back end and the front end. And I think the way that the team is built, I think Scott hit it perfectly. I think it's going to be exciting to watch. I think they're going to put some hits down. They're going to get to the quarterback. They're going to make some plays. So I'm ready for it. I think it's going to be a fun season. And I think even if they don't shut teams down, our offense should be able to score points a little bit better this year if everybody stays on the field. So, I'm fine with a 48-38 kind of victory. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind that. Those are fun games to watch. I don't like that 15-10 kind of game, right? Like those are I love defense, but man, as long as you got a good offense, I think the defense can walk out of the building feeling, we did okay. We held our own. So that's all we need in this offense.
Those are all really good points. And that, the focus goes on the wide receivers, and then we talk about the secondary here. But if you look at the draft, out of their 10 picks, 7 of them were spent in the trenches between O linemen and defensive linemen. So you can see like the plan is they do want to build there. Just because they took Chase in the first round doesn't mean they don't understand that they need to get better up front. So, yeah, the other one obviously was Captain America, Chris Evans. If you didn't realize earlier, that's who we were talking about. We kind of covered that one. People say Chase is going to take targets away from others. AJ Green vacated targets. I'm pretty sure Peter Howard just shows up and tells you you're an idiot if you mention vacated targets. Sorry, Gabby. But no, read Peter Howard has some really good work on vacated targets and what they mean. I understand what Gabby's saying here. I do think hopefully if there is a lot more targets going to Chase, that is going to mean good things for this offense as opposed to them going to AJ Green. I think Boyd will benefit the most. We kind of agree with that. We didn't touch on Auden Tate. Is he worth like anything in case of emergency, injury, something like that Auden Tate could step in and be pretty good for this team?
I will say I have him. No, go ahead.
Taylor, you got a take?
No, not a strong take. I was going to say I have him on one dynasty team because it's a league that requires you to have one player from your hometown team. And he was the only Bengal I could snag late. So he's the only reason he's on my squad. But I hope I never have to plug him into my lineup, to be honest.
Yeah, something's gone horribly wrong if you're starting Auden Tate in your flex. Your team is in rebuild mode. Let's put it that way. I will put this. I don't have a take on Tate. I do think he is a pretty good filler, as in like a role player for the team. I don't think he's someone that is going to splash and make any sort of waves in Dynasty unless there's 2 massive injuries, which I hate even saying out loud. Even if there's one, couple of week injury or somebody has to miss some time, Tate's the kind of guy, like you were saying before, like 6 for 60. Tate's kind of like a 4 for 40, right? It's like, I don't know, he moves the chains. He might get a first down or two here and there, and he's a role player for the team. He's not the heart of the team or anything like that, but he does get in there and he does make plays. If they go 4 wide, Tate's going to be the 4th most likely. So I don't hate it if you're in a 17 or 18 team league, some crazy deep thing. Sure, go for it. But I think he's fine on waivers in most fantasy leagues. Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, I'm sure he is.
I do think the thing with Tate, though, is he's probably one injury away from being relevant in a league where you start 11 or 12 players or more. But I do think one thing to watch out for is don't be shocked if the Bengals go to a lot of shotgun, mixing in the slot, 4 receiver sets down in the goal line or down in the red zone. And, you look up at the end of the year and Auden Tate has 25 catches but 6 touchdowns. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up stealing some touchdowns and you're going, yes, T. Higgins. Oh, no, that's not T. Higgins.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So you're going, man, like if you would just take a couple of those touchdowns and put them in the place what we want, because I do think that's where they'll use him. They will target him in the red zone, especially since they don't have a tight end necessarily that's dominant there.
There was a whole side conversation that had nothing to do with Bengals in our comment section here. That was basically Cam Akers or Derrick Henry. Is anybody taking the Henry side on straight up?
No.
In Dynasty,
I can't think of a time.
You don't have to. I can't think off Akers for Henry plus. But,
that's what I was going to say. I can't think of a time when I would give up Akers for Henry straight up. I just can't. I can definitely think of a time, if nothing else, to do it the other way. But I don't think I could give up Akers just for Henry. I'd probably want something else, only because the market is so nuts on Akers. There's so many people talking about it. And I was listening to some other podcasts. I think it was actually the Trade Addicts podcast, maybe even, where they were talking about, is the market really that crazy? Like when you try to move Akers, which I've tried to move Akers recently, the offers are not there for what everybody thinks it should be. So maybe it is more fair than we think about. I mean, in theory, Akers is younger and has a lot more potential value, but Henry has actual value. And I think a lot of times we just got into this debate on Twitter with a bunch of people where, value is a weird thing. And we always talk about it differently in Dynasty. And sometimes people forget that production value has a lot of actual value, right? Like the potential value, the future value, like where the upside, all that. What are they putting up on the scoreboard? Because that's what you win titles with. It's not with pretty rosters. You know what I mean? I'd rather have an ugly title than a pretty roster. You know what I mean? So sometimes you just got to get a little bit lucky and have hit the right way. And maybe that's Henry this year, right? Maybe Henry puts up RB 5 or 6. And at the end of the season, you're kind of like, well, and I think there was even a comment like, well, maybe I sell him now. Well, his value is probably worth less than it is now. So like maybe you've lost some value, but he just put up RB5 for you the whole year. Like, I mean, did you lose that value or did you use that value? You know what I mean? I think all the time too, we're trying to trade before we get out on someone, but if he's putting up that kind of number for you, you probably had a good year and maybe you won some money. Maybe you won your title, right? I don't think you lost value at that. You used it. That's the whole point of these guys. So don't be afraid to ride out, like you even said before, don't be afraid to ride out a guy into the end of his season and the end of his career, right? I just dropped AJ Green in one league for Jeff Wilson. I had to. It's like, I just think AJ Green's done. I carried him for 4 years. You know what I mean? Like he was my boy. I love AJ Green. But he's on a different team, so I don't care as much. And he's hurt. He's not the same guy. It's, at some point you got to move on. So again, it's like, do what's best for your team. But yeah, back to the question. I can't see just straight up giving Akers for Henry at this moment in time. But if you do it and you like it, go for it.
A good question from Ja Webb here. Can I trust Jamar Chase as my weekly wide receiver 3 consistently? From a redraft perspective, let's say, because I don't think this is really more of a dynasty question right here, but what do you guys think? Redraft? I say yes, which is actually kind of crazy considering the history of wide receivers. I mean, I know we just saw what Justin Jefferson did, which was, has everybody's expectations out of whack, but wide receiver 3 consistently, yeah, I think Chase can do that. You guys agree?
Yeah, I don't do like in-depth. I did in-depth projections for one team, the Chiefs, like last year. And after I did the Chiefs, I decided I wasn't going to do it for the rest of the teams because it takes way too long. It's just not my cup of tea. But I've tried to do some Bengals projections. And I actually think Chase is going to probably lead the team in targets, or could at least. And I think he's due for at minimum 120 targets. And if I see 120 targets and assume he's getting 85 catches, something like that. And I really wouldn't be shocked, at the end of the year if he has 140 targets or something like that. So I think that kind of production I'm pretty comfortable throwing into my wide receiver 3 slot. Chase doesn't really strike me as a guy that's going to have a ton of weeks that just completely debilitate you. A lot of bust games, but he might lack the upside in some of those games when he's sharing the field with Higgins and Boyd. But I mean, I'd be fine with him as my wide receiver 3.
I mean, he's top 20 in redraft. If you're looking at high stakes ADP, he's by far the first Bengal off the board. You can argue he's about a round and a half higher than Higgins and almost 3 rounds higher than Boyd. So maybe you're not getting the value there, but you could also say if they're going to be as concentrated as we've talked about, they're all 3 maybe a little bit of a value compared to some of the guys. I could put Chris Godwin is going around ahead of Chase. I'm not necessarily sure he out-targets Chase. So and in Dynasty, I've talked about this on DLF, that the bar that Chase has to hit to be in the wide receiver 1 discussion overall next year is pretty low. You were talking 70 catches, 1,000 yards. And I think he's right up there with Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, C.D. Lamb. That's how the community is going to treat him. A 21-year-old rookie that produces right away, we're going to jump him all the way up. So you
just had that same conversation
you start him
today.
every week.
Yeah.
Yep. You start him every week.
Just had the same conversation with Peter Howard and Cooper there for DLF, just about how in Dynasty his value, it's already what some might think is closer to a ceiling because he's at wide receiver 10 in ADP right now for Dynasty, which is steep. I mean, last August, C.D. Lamb was the highest rated rookie, and he was wide receiver 20. So you think there's room to grow, and for Chase, it's kind of like, wow, is he? There's not really a lot of room to grow. He's already valued at his peak, and it's like, I mean, we've seen over. I did a quick study, might be an article, might not be, but like over the last 5 years, like rookie wide receivers, as long as they're finishing as the top rookie in their class or the second best rookie in their class, they're gaining value. Doesn't matter, DJ Moore had like a wide receiver 37 finish or something like that as a rookie, gained 8 spots in ADP for wide receivers. Like they're going to gain value. And we saw CD Lamb do that. He was productive, not as productive as maybe people would have liked last year. And he jumped all the way up and he's like wide receiver 7 now. I think Chase could have a very similar trajectory.
It's 200 points. 200 points is the threshold. And obviously with an extra game, it's maybe a little bit more, but every player that's hit that since 2014, they're dynasty, and they have to be 21. That's the other thing. This isn't a 23 or 24-year-old rookie. This is, whether it's artificial or not, Chase is going to play his entire rookie year at 21. So if he goes out and has a top 30 season, people are going to be like, oh, well, he has to get 20% better next year, right? So let's just jump him up 2 rounds. I mean, that's how they're going to treat him. So from an asset, him and Kyle Pitts, I know this isn't a Falcons podcast, but him and Kyle Pitts literally don't have to do that much to just explode next year. So why not take him this year?
Well, here, so I'll jump in with this. Last month, I wrote an article on Fantasy Pros, and I posted it on Twitter and kind of got some interesting feedback, but it was how drafting Jamar Chase could ruin your dynasty team, right? He was going at the time as 21st overall in May ADP. Well, actually, it was technically April ADP because I was writing it in May. So he was going as wide receiver 8, 21st overall. That's a second-round dynasty startup pick. That's too early. In my mind, like that's too risky for a rookie like this. And I did a bunch of research and had a graph in there and everything from DLF and everything. I'm like looking at the last like number 1 receivers. You've got guys like Corey Davis, DJ Moore, of course we talked about, N'Keal Harry, remember him? Marquise Brown, Henry Ruggs. I mean, CeeDee Lamb did well and went up, but almost everybody else on that list went down in the last year. Now, DJ Moore went up and kind of came back down, but those are cherry picking in a way, right? Those are kind of comparable based on the top receiver in their class, the no doubt slam dunk option, and they weren't slam dunk options. So wide receiver 10, if he's even come down now and he has to 30 overall, he's come down from his value as of April ADP to more of what I think is a reasonable value. I think 3rd round is better for him. I'd rather get him in the 4th, though. I don't want Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Yes, he's got a lot of potential, but he's also got a lot of potential on the negative, right? He could be a N'Keal Harry, and I hate saying that on a Bengals podcast, but like there is still, we think he's going to be great, but I remember everybody saying that about Harry too. I remember people saying that about Corey Davis and his year 5 breakout. Finally, they get to say they were right. I mean, it's the receiver position is so tough in the NFL. And until I see it, I don't like drafting a guy that early with that kind of pick. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying it. Just be careful if you do that. You need to go get floor guys after that. That's the way I build my team is like if you're going to get risky early, and I'm not saying you can't, but I like to build a team. If I go risky with my first 3 picks, then build me some floor in after that so at least I can weather the storm. And if I don't hit, I'm not out. because there's nothing worse than being like 1 or 2 years into a dynasty league and you already have to rebuild because all of your picks were horrible. I'd rather have Godwin than Chase. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have some of those guys that are kind of going in that range. And that's kind of what that article laid out. It was just, I just don't think he's worth that as of today. I do think he could go up from where he is, though. And I'm not saying that he's only going down. I'm not predicting that he's going to be terrible. I'm just saying the range of outcomes is still pretty wide. So it's just more of a hedge your bets kind of move for me. That's all.
One of the great things is that like there are a bunch of different ways to play dynasty, right? Like, I think, I know at DLF we get so focused on the value, and like Kyle Pitts almost cannot bust because I just cannot even envision a scenario where he's not a top 5 tight end in startups next year, So it's like, it's one of those things where from a value perspective, it's like it's an asset that you have that's not going to lose value. But from what you're talking about is more like that production. You don't think the production is going to match the investment right now. Which again, there's a bunch of different ways to play it, and there's not necessarily one right way or one wrong way.
We don't know if he's going to be Justin Jefferson or N'Keal Harry, right? We just don't. I'm not saying he's going to be one or the other. I'm just saying there is that range of outcomes that if you ignore the downside and only look at the upside, then your team is always great and you never lose. Oh, wait a minute. The reality comes in and that almost never happens, right? So I'm just saying drafting anyone at their ceiling. I said the same thing about Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, right? Everybody's like, oh, he's a first-round dynasty startup pick. And I'm like, I'm not touching that with the 10-foot pole. It's just like I just don't like doing any rookie that early. Running backs are even stronger than receiver by nature of the argument of what they do and how they come into the league. They're almost always better immediate hit. Receivers take a year or two. We know this. That's why the value goes up, because everybody knows the value is going to go up. So it's like, well, okay, so we can just kind of predict that the receivers take some time. Like you hit it before. If he's receiver 37 in his first year, his value is going to go up. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, he might not go up. Like there is still a lower downside there than other receivers going around him. That's all I was saying.
Well, I'll say this. Receivers don't take a year anymore. The new value trend in Dynasty, if they don't hit right away, you can argue you get rid of them. I mean, that's how we've seen, and this isn't the same as 5 years ago. There are 100 good receivers in the NFL. So if you don't hit right away, you are immediately pushed for your job on your depth chart. So I'm not saying Chase is going to get pushed, but I look at startups. Everyone knows I'm in a ton of leagues, like 60 leagues. So, I mean, 6 shares of Calvin Ridley, I've offered him for Chase in every league, rejected in every league. Yep. And that's a guy that I think a lot of people would go, production, give me that Calvin Ridley production. It doesn't matter. People don't look at receivers and go production over value. A lot of times it's like, give me the most valuable receivers. I'll worry about it later. Then you get into
But you agree with that, though. You'd rather have Chase than Ridley as well, or you wouldn't have offered the trade, right?
Exactly. But I think the
so
thing
you're playing
is
with sharp people. That's all it is. Like you just got good people in your leagues. Yeah.
Exactly. But I do think that there is a merit. There is kind of a misnomer that receivers take a year. If you show me a receiver that can't carve out a top 50 season as a rookie, I'll show you a receiver that probably isn't really ever relevant in Dynasty. And I know people will argue, well, Jalen Reagor this, Denzel Mims this, Brian Edwards this.
Right? Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Those guys are going to be maybe solid players, but are they ever going to get to a point after a bad rookie season where the Dynasty community just says, I have to have that guy? I don't think so. It would take a guy like Jalen Reagor, like 2 or 3 top 24 seasons for people to say, I have to have him. You know what I mean?
Or Paris Campbell, right? Remember Paris Campbell was like a first-round rookie pick and then got injured and then like never went anywhere. And now you could probably get a third for him if you tried. So I'm not disagreeing with any of that logic. I just think that, again, in that second-round startup, I just don't like that kind of risk, right? There's definitely risk for every player. And I'm not saying that there's no risk for Ridley or no risk for Godwin. I'm just saying there's less risk. On those kind of chip players, if it's going to be my wide receiver 1, if he's wide receiver 8 overall in 10 now, that's a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be careful if you do, because you got to know what you're getting into with that. You got to remember there is a floor that we don't know yet, right? Higgins was supposed to be a great guy and he's supposed to be the wide receiver 1, the alpha, and then they went and drafted Chase, and now what? Higgins is nothing. Right, that was 1 year ago. He had a great rookie year, and nobody's talking about it. He's the steal to me. So, like again, the opportunities in the NFL change a lot faster than they ever did, which is, I think, exactly why what you said is exactly true. It's not that they take 2 years; they just don't get 2 years anymore. Offenses aren't able to sit around and wait. Your head coaches change over. You've got all these different things that come across, and everything changes so fast. We're all wanting a win now, and if you don't win now, we'll move on to the next guy that can. And that goes true for any position. But I'm just saying receivers don't, like Justin Jefferson, don't come along every year. You know what I mean? It's just not, DK Metcalfs don't come along every year. We've been blessed in the last few to have guys ever since Odell Beckham came in the league to have tons of stellar talent. Does that mean it's a trend, or does that mean just we're in a pocket of luck? I don't know yet. And I think there's a lot of risk at that top level. I'd rather have stable floors in my opinion at those picks. I'm not saying that's other ways are wrong. I'm just saying that's how I do it.
Taylor, you get to decide right now which one is your favorite out of Andrew and Scott, and tell me which one you agree with.
Oh, no.
My favorite is I'll take Jamar. I traded, I passed on Jamar Chase in a rookie draft for Travis Etienne because my team was just destroyed. Like I was starting Kerryon Johnson last year at running back. Like I went 0 RB the wrong way. And so I was like, gotta get a running back. And after the draft, I traded for Jamar Chase because I needed a share so badly that I didn't care. So I know it's risky, but I think I would take Jamar Chase because I feel pretty confident. Like putting my fandom aside, I feel pretty confident in the prospect, in the environment he's going into. I mean, we consider like that impacts a lot of players as well as their environment, and where he's going in Cincinnati and the offense he'll be in. That I think he will be poised to explode in value and production.
We're just over an hour, so I'll get you guys out of here. But does anybody have any plans in their Scott Fishbowl draft to take Evan McPherson?
I actually might. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to give away too much of my strategy, but he's one of the, I would love to have Evan McPherson on my SFB team with my 22nd pick. Right. That's kind of like I always like to have somebody fun in my last pick. Last year, the guy that I wanted, I forget who it was, got taken. I took Nick Boyle and I was like, that was a horrible pick. And I just felt bad about it. So I immediately got lucky, I guess, because I dropped him for James Robinson. Right. So and that helped everybody. But the year before that, I drafted Scott Fish with my last round pick. And I was just like, going in with good vibes. So the same thing this year. Like if Evan McPherson's there in the 22nd, I don't know. I think it'd be kind of fun.
Why not?
Yeah.
Very good. It's going to be very interesting to see. We had some comments in there, and I did respond. Gabby asked about the vacated targets. I posted a link to YouTube. Definitely check that out. Peter Howard's going to do a much better job of explaining that than I will. But with that, I have one last question for everybody. I need you to tell me exactly what the Cincinnati Bengals record is going to be this year. Andrew, starting with you.
Okay, well, my fandom says 17-0, but that's my heart, and my heart's never right when it comes to the Bengals. I think I would settle for a 10-7 season, and I say settle as in like that's the least I would settle for. I think the way this offense is built, if everybody stays healthy, we should get at least 10 wins. So that's pretty much where I'm landing on it. I could be way off. I could still be way too optimistic, but I think with the new schedule and the way that 17 games and all this stuff, I think 10-7 would be a terrific record for me this year. Probably enough for the playoffs, but the way the NSA or the AFC North is, it's hard to say. But I don't know. That's what my gut's telling me, and I don't know if it's right or not. But
Taylor.
So I actually covered this in the last episode I did for the Who Dey Den. Shout out, check it out, podcast. I went through the schedule and I was a little harsh, probably, but I prefer to be more optimistic than more realistic than optimistic. I guessed 6-11, and I think I was too harsh, but I think I could see them going 7-10. Obviously, anything above that, I'm ecstatic, but I still have some concerns until I see this offensive line play together, until I see what this defense looks like. I think 7-10 is, a little under 500, but it'd be, I don't even want to say acceptable. It would be something. It'd be an improvement on 3 wins. Unfortunately, enough to save Zach Taylor's job. So
that's what I was going to ask you. All right.
Scott, what do you think?
I woke up last weekend to a text from a friend. He goes, "Hey, I'm in Vegas." And I go, "Okay." And the only thing that comes to my mind is, okay, I got money. Let's send it over. I want to make a bet. So I'm looking at, give me the over on the Bengals or Kentucky football, whatever one you can find first, because everyone knows I'm a UK alum. He goes, "Well, Kentucky's not on the board yet." So I go, "What's the Bengals over under?" He said 6.5. I go, "Lay it down." 6.5. I went over. That's where my money's at. That's where I'll stick with. I like 7-10. I'll go 8-9, but Taylor's prediction would be mighty fine with me.
Sure.
I do like opening week against Minnesota with, getting Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and all the whole crew back together there. And the schedule's not terrible, like to open up until the bye week. I think they could surprise. They play a 4th place schedule, and it shows some weaker divisions depending on, if Aaron Rodgers is not in Green Bay, that all of a sudden that week 5 doesn't look near as scary. against them. So yeah, there might be some reason for optimism, and I definitely appreciate every single one of you for tuning in and for you guys contributing here. This was awesome. Andrew, it was awesome to do this again. One last time, just plug where everybody can find you, what you're working on right now.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Hall FF. Pretty much everything I post or all my comments and thoughts are there. You can come find me and have a good chat. Let's discuss.
Taylor.
Yeah, at _Taylor Cornell.
With me. When's your next episode with me coming out?
I was gonna say, don't put me on the spot for like when I'm actually recording, because I'm not good at that. Yeah, I have a solo Dynasty podcast, the Dino Source, and my friend Cal's gonna be a guest here soon once we get our schedules aligned. So, but yeah, check me out on Twitter at _Taylor Cornell, and my bio has links to all my podcast stuff.
I'm a longtime subscriber to the Dino Source.
Thank you. I appreciate you. No,
Yeah.
I remember the first time you said that. The first time you said that on a live stream, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have a fan!" So I appreciate you. Just
That's
so
right.
you know.
That's right. Scott, how about you? I mean, obviously, on the DLF network, but what are you working on? What can people be looking for to support you?
Yeah, at Dynasty Chill Pod, we have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/Dynasty and Chill. About 100 deep over there. Great Dynasty theory talks. If you like game theory, if you like what you hear on my show, check it out. And then redraft. I mean, chase the helmet. If anybody's around in the northern Kentucky area, I'll be in Louisville the day or the weekend before Labor Day at the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championships, doing all of their high stakes drafts there. So if anybody's around, check it out. But yeah, this was a great time talking with fellow Bengals fans. It's nice to have arguments or friendly debates with people that are not completely out of the loop on the franchise.
Yeah, we got into some really good discussion, man. Honestly, even a beyond Bengals, that was some really good discussion. And I think the Bengals are a fun team. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. They're going to be one of those, you want to have, you're going to be excited when Hansen goes to them on the Red Zone channel. And so with that, for these guys, and just one last thing, dynastyleaguefootball.com. Make sure you are checking that out. The premium subscription there is amazing. A couple times during this, I went to the tools on Dynasty League Football. They're absolutely worth. Look, for $10 deposit to Monkey Knife Fight right now, Monkey Knife Fight matches that, and you get a year of DLF. It's a no-brainer. Go check that out. Do that. It's absolutely worth it. I promise you won't be disappointed. So for these guys, for DLF, I'm Calvin and Hobby, and we will see you on the next